Okay, I'm going to call this joint school board session to order. And today is Friday, December 14th, 2018. Just a couple of reminders before you do a roll call is our mics are a little different now, so you don't have to be like this anymore. You can actually stand back from it and it records just fine. The other thing, if you would say your name before you speak, because these are tape recordings, so when individuals listen, they're not quite sure who they're listening to, so it would be nice if you'd state your name first. Oh, these you do have, sorry, my mistake. These you do have to pull up. They're different than our other new ones, so yes, you do have to speak into the mic. Oh, okay, and it is video too. So at this time, Katie, if we could have our roll call.
Oh, sure. Ms. Marset?
Here.
Ms. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Donnelly?
Here.
Mr. Foster?
Here.
Ms. Hildy? Here. Mr. Holloman? And Ms. Snelling?
Here.
And roll call for the meeting.
Mr. Dunbar?
Here.
Mr. Croft?
Here.
Mr. Constant?
Here.
Mr. Dyson?
Here.
Mr. Trainee?
Here.
Mr. Rivera?
Present.
Mr. Peterson?
Present.
Ms. LaFrance? Ms. Quinn Davidson? Mr. Weddleton?
Okay.
So at this time, I'm going to remove the minutes of the previous joint meeting are not available, and so we need to move that to our March meeting. Is there any dissension? Okay. Approval of agenda. Is there any dissension on that? Do we have a second? Okay. And any dissension on the agenda? Or any changes? Oh. Okay. And at this time, I'll ask Susan LaFrance to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Suzanne.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, agenda's been approved, items of business, and I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Bishop to give us an update to our response and recovery from the November 30th earthquake.
Thank you, Madam President, and welcome to our assembly. Welcome, Mayor. And we're going to just jump around in time a little bit. We started school for the majority of our students this Monday, and we had just a 2-minute welcome letter back, or video back to our community and our kids entering after a week off of school. We're going to just share that. I want to note in this, the biggest question that we have had is, are our kids safe? And so we wanted to share that, yes, when kids return, they're safe. We'll just take a look at this and then I'll share the rest of the presentation. Hello, ASD families. We are delighted to welcome our students back to school. I know that there may be a lot of questions and perhaps some angst about our students' return. I want you to know that we understand. There has been a lot of work done in our building to ensure that they are safe for students' return. There have been multiple inspections by experts, contractors, and district personnel. Inspections concentrated on structural, power, water, and gas, as well as air quality. Earthquake repair is paramount. Teams have been working around the clock to rectify the damage. This repair will continue as needed throughout our district. However, please know, when damage is extensive or structural strength compromised, we have made other arrangements for the continuation of school programs with relocation of students. Cleaning has been ongoing,
from debris removal to surface and deep cleaning. There have been volunteers from around the municipality. People have been willing to pitch in and help make our sites the best they can be in preparation for our kids. I have been overwhelmed with the resilience of our students, staff, and community. The day of the quake highlighted the strength within us. Our students responded as they have been prepared to do, through education and practice drills. Our staff put students first to make sure all students were safe and accounted for. Our community has rallied around the situation with caring and support. Thank you. We are fortunate to live in this great state of Alaska, and I am thankful for my colleagues, our students, their families, and our entire community. Together, we made ASD the best district in this country. Thank you once again for your support in this road to recovery. Tomorrow is going to be a great day.
So we sent that video out on Sunday after a week, and I'm just going to share some pictures of the week of the earthquake and our what we do and how we started through this. And then Tom Roth is going to take over, and we have guests in the audience and really our partners and our contractors, as well as our people that can answer any questions you have. It definitely was bigger than us and bigger than any one of us, bigger than the city or the district. It was really our entire community, so we just wanted to share that. If anyone has any questions, we have told our story through our website. On the ASD website, you can go to Hot Topics, and under Hot Topics is every piece of communication, photographs of schools. We've been keeping track of it. It also has videos of the time, whether they were, we hot linked any news articles and any videos we had done ourselves. And so if you have any questions, they really can be answered. The entire story's on there. And some of the information has been picked up nationally, as we've had the New York Times do a story and some others contact a teacher. So what we have is just the pictures. Very good. Okay, so here's the update. We'll start with, she shared the webpage. Now we can go to just the safety. We want our parents and just community to know that we practice drills. This is actually a picture of a drill that we had before the actual incident, but so much to say that even in common areas, we teach kids, whether it's for earthquake or other drills, what to do even outside their classrooms. But this is a video that about 30 seconds I'm going to share, and a UAA professor was filming this teacher. And this one has gone nationally as well, and his name is Mr. Bennis from Mears. And he's getting a secondary degree, and so his teacher, to get his master's, was filming him for his course. And the earthquake happened in the middle of that. So we have a camera in this classroom. We don't generally have cameras in our classrooms, but I want to demonstrate middle school kids without prompting. This is what our kids have been trained to do.
Don't let yourself be convinced to do something that you know is bad, and then you follow the shared protocol.
So it's about a 2-minute video, but they go on to the teacher checking, from under his table as well. Is everybody okay? They're saying yes. He says text your parents, let them know you're okay then. And he asks the question, what should we do? And someone says, listen, you listen, and that's part of the Alice, where you're alert and you listen. And so they were listening for instructions. What they heard instead was an alarm. The fire alarm went off, and you don't see kids pushing, shoving, asking questions. They just get out, get their coat, because they stay under the whole time. and just leave. They just leave without being asked anything. There are no further instructions. So really just beautifully done. And if anyone has ever worked with middle school children, they're a little persnickety. So this is even exceptional with middle schoolers. Earthquake response. This room became our incident command center, and we divided it up in secondary and elementary to take the data of how many students were at school. We have 24,000 secondary students, about 24,000 K through 6. And secondary students, of course, were in school. We had approximately 5,000 elementary kids in schools, and about 5,000 or so that hadn't been to school yet, and about 14,000 on buses. So even though they weren't in our buildings, they experienced this earthquake in a bus. And so we had to still reunite them, get to school, then reunite them with their families, while some of their schools were evacuated and some of the schools stayed. We had some schools that maybe one ceiling tile fell. We had most of our schools that didn't have damage, but the ones that had damage, it became extensive, some of it, and we'll share that today. Here's just some pictures of the damage. This is greening up at the top. Consequently, a lot of our damage wasn't structurally, but it was with water because of the fire suppression system, just the pipes breaking or coming loose during the shake, which flooded some classrooms. And then you have all your teaching materials are wet, and you have to water extraction and all that stuff. But here's just some. When we did have damage, it was through the ceilings. However, ceiling tiles are designed to be light. They are designed that ceiling tiles should not worry us. So the fact that we have ceiling tiles is a good thing. It's part of our construction, it's part of our building code, but having the students under the desks and under something worked. This is Eagle River Elementary School, and this was one that actually had structural compromises, primarily in the gym, which had the exterior just falling off, as well as the interior. And since then, structural engineers have been in. They've secured it, and so that we could remove the items and start new schools. But just some general pictures of damage. This is greening, and if you notice that's corrugated cement. It's a corrugated facade. That's causing us the most trouble. We do have some beam work to do, but that stuff runs floor to ceiling, sometimes 2 or more than 2-3 stories high. And with the continuing tremors, it's falling off, it's crumbling. So we have learned in Alaska, the late 70s and early 80s, I guess they'd like to do a lot of concrete facade. There's schools in the valley, that's the same problem. So we're looking at architects now and looking for solutions, but Colony Middle School, out there, the same thing was the interior facade of the building is coming down, and they used kind of this fake skinny brick in theirs. But now we move from the damage, taking a look at that, whether it was books falling out and everything a mess, to recovery, because we know that our goal was to get kids back in school. And we had some schools that could have been ready by Thursday. However, the ones that weren't, we did not have the human resources to be able to get them up and running. So what we did was work through a team effort that had the goal of starting school on Monday, and we dispatched teachers from some buildings to others to help other teachers. Our school bus drivers didn't necessarily need to work because there was no kids to bus to school. However, they moved. We used buses to move the teachers' items from classroom to classroom who had to be relocated. So we wanted to ensure that our community, if they wanted to work, we didn't want to have them impact their personal families, especially by the holidays. We needed the help anyway. So if you were ready and willing to work, you had a job. Hundreds of people came to work, not in their regular site. They were reassigned to another site. And in fact, of our 6,000 employees and 3,200 teachers, we had 500 teachers working Saturday and Sunday. Boxing things up mainly to get out of, relocate classrooms from Greening. Of course, you might have known to Chugiak High. And then Eagle River Elementary School moved into Homestead and Birchwood. And just the receiving schools put in a tremendous amount of time. These are student-ready classrooms that weren't classrooms a week ago. This is Bartlett, looking great. The pictures of Bartlett, their 5th story, every ceiling tile came out, and those flexible ducts just came out as well. So once they did, this is Fire Lake, looking wonderful. You could eat off of that floor. But we wanted it to look safe. We wanted it to look like their school and homey and what they had, that they loved. And so we ensured that we really put in time, both again with our employees as well as contractors, to just get the work done. Because so many of our kids experienced this earthquake on a bus, we had teachers go ride buses with kids in certain areas when they knew if they had a rough time. Teachers rode the first day back to school on a bus to share that, you know, everything's going to be okay. We had the return, the bottom, this picture here is Birchwood, just welcoming new students who, some of the students at Eagle River Elementary School were walkers. They had never ridden a bus, and they might have been 5th grade. So they had never ridden a bus. So it was a big experience, not only to go to new school, but the first time ride a bus. So we took that into consideration. Part of the recovery for us was also in the social, emotional, or mental area. We wanted to ensure that kids could come back and process. So a lot of our psychologists, school counselors put together lesson plans. We had a lot of earthquake buddy stuffed animals telling the story with kids, really processing. The kids had stories. Everybody has an earthquake story now. So we worked through those. It was just amazing. We adults can learn amazing things from children. They're resilient, they came back, they're excited, and they're excited to be in school. They miss their friends and their teachers, and really our teachers worked 100% overtime to make that happen, and I'm just indebted to them. It was really terrific. Chugach High students are the ones standing on the furniture, welcoming the new students that are coming in, and from Greening Middle. They went right into an assembly, they greeted them, high-fiving them, and consequently how we opened it, I got a call from a school district up north and said, how'd you do that? And they did some of the same processes to open up their high school and invite Houston Middle kids. We had service dogs throughout our district. They did take one day off because they were overwhelmed with children. So yesterday they were not in schools, and then they're back in schools today, but they were there Monday through Wednesday and then Friday. Just fun, just something different. And I just want to let you know that this is, I think, Bartlett, but so you know, music plays on. We are ASD strong and just thrilled that school is school, and routine is good for all of us. It helps us have a sense of self-awareness and control in our lives, and we knew that that was highly important for the young people of our city. And with that, I'm just going to turn it over to Tom. He's going to introduce some of our partners here who really just probably left other jobs and other work, and I know one of them was with the municipality, so sorry, to come to us to help with schools first. And I think our whole community rallied around that. And so I'd like to turn it over to the person who ran jointly with me our command center, Mr. Tom Roth, and I want to say that I am indebted to the military training and the military experience in our city, because Tom and his crew.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. I appreciate the opportunity. So if I might, what I'd like to do is to provide everyone a quick snapshot in time, if you will, where we are. But before I do that, I do want to spend a little time recognizing people. By way of background, our system, the pictures that Dr. Bishop showed of people in this room right after the earthquake happened, trying to bring some sense of order. There was a parallel effort going on down in our maintenance shop, and by our standard operating procedure, you know, my senior director of maintenance and operations, Mr. Darren Hargraves, who was sitting next to me, and Mr. Tom Fenisef and his team, they pulled together their teams to do what we call a rapid visual assessment of all of our schools. So as we were getting accountability of students and ensuring safety across the district, you know, these folks were organizing what was really the ground root effort to understand where we stood in our buildings, and that recovery effort that 10 days later, you know, based on the superintendent's intent, you know, we had kids going back to school. So I do want to thank, we had 3 general contractors and a architectural firm that quite frankly, dropped everything as a part of this day zero effort. Darren was getting calls from these great Americans to help us in our recovery effort. And it's not lost on me that there was tremendous amount of opportunity cost them doing that. So I do want to recognize these folks, and I would tell you, Dr. Bishop talked about my last profession. I would fight with these guys anywhere, at any time. So I see here from Roger Hickle, we do have Mr. Hickle himself and his team. John Hickle, Aaron Van, and Scott Dunlap. Again, these guys took on most of the projects that Roger Hickle was doing were kind of in the center of the city, some of the hardest hit schools. Again, great partnership. I see Mr. Curtis McQueen here from Eklutna and his great team. I see Bill Doss and everybody who was here. My regrets, I don't know all your names. And Eklutna took on, probably our hardest hit schools in the Eagle River and Chugiak area, and they continue to work in those schools. And then I see Jonathan Hornak here from Cornerstone, again taking on some very difficult schools. And they get the distinction of being the general contractor that brought up the last school, and that was King Tech High School just 2 days ago in one of our harder hit schools. And then I don't know if David's here, but we also had Reed Middleton engineers going through all of our schools for structural assessments, and that again is kind of an ongoing thing. So if I might, I'd like to again provide a very quick snapshot of where we are and where we kind of see ourselves going. And I've got the team here. We are certainly prepared to respond to any questions, and we're happy to do that. So where are we? Of all the schools in the district, we currently have 2 schools that are still offline, and those are Eagle River Elementary School and Greening Middle School, which are down for structural issues. Right now, we are planning that those schools will remain offline through the remainder of the academic year. So we are, at this point, we are continuing to do recovery operations from the earthquake. As Dr. Bishop mentioned, our team, our own staff in ASD maintenance, operations, and capital planning, construction, and all of our contractors have put our schools back online so they are safe, they're functional, and that we are able to resume education in the district. But for things that were damaged either by water or glycol, we are in the process of replacing carpets. We're still fixing drywall. We're doing those things to put our schools back into a place where they were at 8/28 on Friday the 30th of November, and that's our goal. We are transitioning though, and we're in the process of doing this now, to conduct deliberate assessments of those schools in the district that were most, in our evaluation, most significantly impacted by the earthquake. The 2 that obviously come to mind are Eagle River and Greening, and we have issued a notice to proceed for our architectural and structural engineers to go and to do a much more detailed evaluation so we can understand what the scope of the damage is and what we need to do to repair or not those buildings. So this is ongoing. This Tuesday, we will be meeting with the State of Alaska Department of Homeland Security Emergency Preparation and FEMA representatives to do a on-the-ground walkthrough of 4 of our worst hit schools, and also begin what I think will be a fairly involved and lengthy process of identifying those needs in the district, our facility needs that can be reimbursed either through state funds or through federal funding. So that is where we are in the process, and I'll pause to answer any questions.
Mr. Trainee,
Thank you, ma'am. Just a quick question.
you want to turn that on?
Go ahead.
Right on top there.
Thank you. Thanks. Quick question, administration. Deferred maintenance has always been a problem with the school district. Now you've got a lot of deferred maintenance. In talking to the feds, would you find out for us what portion deferred maintenance plays, and there are money coming to help us recover? Because looking what happened in hurricanes down in Louisiana, for example, they would not cover any deferred maintenance that you didn't take care of yourself. So I want to know if that's still the federal policy and the impact of that on the city of Anchorage, because we've got to take care of deferred maintenance. And from what I understand, the feds don't want to take care of things we didn't take care of. So I want to know what the dollar amount is we're talking about.
Madam President, we will get that. We'll do that.
Certainly, thank you. Any other comments, questions? Yes? I'm sorry.
Yeah, one of the things that went very well was the conduct and demeanor of your teachers and school staff. My understanding is that everybody stayed calm, cool, set a grand example for the kids. And that obviously very, very important, but I understand that went very well, which probably relates to good recruiting and good training. And it's subjective, but disproportionately important, and you ought to be very proud of that.
Yes.
Through the president to Assemblyman Dyson. Absolutely, we are proud, and really a school district is made up of kids and teachers primarily. That's the biggest of our expenses and cost and inputs, and we do have great people, and everybody came together. So thank you for noticing. It was really terrific.
Yes, Mr. Peters.
Thank you, Madam President. And I might be jumping the gun on this question, but are we planning to add the cost of the repairs for Eagle River Elementary and Gooding Middle School to the bond, or are we going to try to take money from savings for that, or do we have a plan? Is it too early? We don't know yet. Just wondering.
I can answer that through the president. The next item we have on the bond, but there's still some work to do, possibly at Monday's board meeting as well. So we had previously approved a bond measure that fell underneath the retirement, but an earthquake happened. So I know our board is still in discussion. We might find out more information on Monday.
And I might just add that we did ask the bond council for some leniency on verbiage in our bond that allows us to use those funds for earthquake damage if need be. But there is some further discussion that will happen on Monday, I believe.
Thank you.
And that just reminded me, we worked with DEED as well through the president. We, any bond that had been already approved and spent, if there were monies remaining, those generally can be spent back on, so if it was for a roof, it could be spent back on a roof. And we have requested from DEED, it isn't a large amount, but that new language could be used, that any unspent funds go to earthquake. And you know, and the new governor supports that, and DEED supports it, but we just have to see how that plays out. But that was another ask as well. Again, it's not a large you know, pot of money, but due to the bond language and DEED regulations, it specifically had to go to similar projects, but we might be able to open up in different areas depending on the approval from the state.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, we're gonna move forward on the update with the April 2019 bond proposal. And Tom, are you giving that report? All right, Mr. Roth.
So next slide, please. So as was addressed briefly, the district, where we are on this bond proposition process, the school board did pass in November a bond proposition in the amount of $55,113,000. This is, to summarize, it truly is a major maintenance bond with the addition of an amount about $12.6 million that the school board thought was important to focus on safety in elementary schools. So there is that amount for the improvement of safety and security specific to the entryway, the vestibules, for 22 elementary schools in the district. We have gone back and we have taken a look at the projects on the bond post earthquake. And in short, with the exception of one, these projects are still valid needs in our district. The one that right now is in question is a roof replacement project for Eagle River Elementary School. And we believe that based on the outcomes of the engineer evaluations in that school here in the next week to 2 weeks, you know, that will inform whether or not this is a viable project to move forward on. If not, you know, as the board president mentioned, we do have language back from bond council that would allow the district, with board approval, to use those funds to other requirements in the district. So I'll pause at this point to answer any questions.
Any questions from assembly or board members? Any comments? Yes, Mayor.
I recognize that a lot of this is pre-earthquake decisions, and I would hope that as a board has a chance to reevaluate, that we're able to incorporate some of that. I don't know at this point whether it's FEMA reimbursable or not, but when I look at a lot of those roof replacement issues, boiler replacement issues, those are things that strike me as energy efficiency opportunities, and I would hope that the bond has enough latitude in it so we can do things like solar, ground source heat pumping, and make sure that we are on the cutting edge of energy efficiency, because ultimately that increases the reliability of our energy systems and the autonomy of each school to function on its own, as well as being a cost reduction.
Thank you. Dr. Bishop.
And Madam President, I would want the Assembly to also know that a change in our bond would come and assist with the ask of the Assembly to make some provisions in your timeline in regard to the timelines of the bond being heard in front of you to get in before voters. So we're literally in a crunch time, and so our board had a postponed meeting this Monday. We're going to have another meeting next Monday. But the ordinances for having those things, I think that the timeline needs to be considered, and I'm not exactly sure of the detail of that, but I know that an ask, if there were to be a change, there might also come with an ask about timeline from the school district.
Mr. Croft.
Yeah, and we checked on that some, so we'll have first reading, I believe, on your bond next Tuesday on the 18th, but not action on it until January 15th. And so I think there's plenty of time for you to recommend a revision, check with bond counsel. I think there'll be time. And then just briefly, Madam Chair, that proposal is still trying to stick to this, let's only put forward what we retire in debt. Is 55 about the number that is retired?
Yes, it is.
It's your decision, and we're both, governing bodies struggling with it ourselves, but at least I, as an Assembly member, am coming to the conclusion that that's not the proper standard. I, at 40, could not live on my 20-year-old rent, right? If I tried to do the rent I paid at 20 at 40, my wife would have patiently explained to me that we had 2 kids and that just wasn't going to work. And with the growth in the district, with the growth in just inflation, if nothing else, it is not an appropriate standard to say this is what I did 20 years ago, therefore it's what I'm doing now. I want you to tell us, here's what we need for our children now and for the next 5 or 10 years, whatever an appropriate time frame is. That may be what it was 20 years ago, it may not be. And I asked for your great staff and got it real quickly, but over the since 2008-9 year up to the 2017-18 year, the school district's bond and indebtedness has gone down 28%. It's gone down from $786 million to $567 million. At the same time, the entire assessed valuation for Anchorage has gone up about 17%. It's gone up from, it's 30, I think it must be trillion, though my head can't get around those numbers, but billion, maybe it's just billion, in debt. Anyway, 30.5 to 35.8 in total assessed valuation. So whatever measure, and your policy sets a cap and sets a measurement that is comparing debt to assessed valuation. And at least that, grows with the economy, grows with population, gives you some sense of where you're doing. But I don't mean to tell you what to do, but I do think that that's retiring what we did 20 years ago is some measure, and it helps, I guess, politically in a bond election, but it isn't an accurate measure of what the need is.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Croft. I'm sorry, Mr. Trainee.
Getting better at this. In the past, you guys have gone out and did a study on the impact to the public of sending a bond out. I would suggest you get with whoever did your last study and see, because we're still dealing with the state that's has no assistance coming to help with the school buildings. And in time past, when we did the other bonds, the state participated. The last 2 years, they're not doing it. And I know Dunleavy said, and there's hope he may do it again. But right now, we've got no assurances. And my concern is the public out there, because they're gonna have to understand they're paying for the whole debt. So we'll make sure we get a survey out there that lets us know where they're coming from. Thanks, President.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you. So I just wanted to respond to Mayor Berkowitz's comment about solar and geothermal and those types of things, which I personally am so in favor of. My understanding is, because I asked that question a few months ago, because we are a government body, we don't get the same kinds of tax rebates that private citizens would, and so it makes it uneconomical, is what I've heard from our department.
Yes.
There are ways we can sell that access to people and actually capitalize on it. So I would encourage the school district. We have an energy efficiency expert who works for the municipality, Shana Kilcoyne. Please check with her. She will happily explain ways that this can not only result in more energy self-sufficiency, but will also be a potential way of raising revenue.
Thank you for that information. Ms. Hildy.
I just wanted to see if we could share some, just in general, the survey results we did have in preparation for doing this bond, and to just thank Mr. Croft for sharing how we have under bonded and continually to decrease the amount we're bonding and some of the constraints it puts on our district. So the more that we provide accurate information to our people in our community and help people understand how bonding works and what the reality is, and then let them make an informed decision. That's going to be the best way to capture voters' intent.
Mr. Forrest, did I see your hand?
No.
Oh, Dr. Bishop.
So, Madam President, we have a couple meetings ago, we shared that with the board. We did have Hayes do an analysis, and they are reviewing it, trying to pull it up now, but I would hate to misquote, so maybe we can go on, and then when they locate the information, we can shout that out. Thank you.
And I'm just going to say my point of view on that survey, and when you look at it, I kind of felt it said whatever you wanted it to say. So there's some contradicting information about, yes, we'll support this, and then turn around and support that. So when you see this, I mean, certainly make your own determination, but I felt the survey was not as helpful as it could be, so I hope that we look at that next year and maybe reword some of our questions. So are there any other comments while we're waiting to pull that up? Yes. Ms. LaFrance.
Okay, thank you. Quick question. On the list, there were several items that include seismic upgrades, And I was just wondering, what are the seismic design standards for facilities in the ASD?
Yes, Dr. Bishop.
Thank you. That, through the president, that's a big answer and a big, very detailed question. But the seismic upgrades that were particularly in here, when we redo a roof, we do seismic upgrades with that roof. And one of those examples was Central. So Central had very minimal damage when that roof was redone. It had seismic upgrades included. But the question, that is more like a report, essentially. But Tom, I don't know if you heard that. It was in regard to seismic upgrades, what, if you can share just off the top of your head and we could follow through with a written report, what do those look like? In addition, I shared how when we redo a roof, we put seismic upgrades with that roof, but what are some other work that we do for that?
Dr. Bishop, thank you for that opportunity. And I'm going to ask Mr. Tom Benesef, my Senior Director for Capital Planning and Construction, to talk to what are some of those aspects of replacement or upgrading to meet the seismic code.
So what we first look at is the structural parts of the building, mainly where you have the ceiling meet the walls and the floor meet the walls. Code back then didn't require those to be tied in. Now they're required to be tied in. Also, you'll see on some of our schools that received upgrades, in the gym, on the glue lam, the large beams that go across the ceiling, you'll see a reinforcing tension cable. And that's made to strengthen those beams so they're more able to take the loads both in shear, and vertical and horizontal type earthquakes.
Yes, Mr. Wendell, yes.
Following up on that, so we've had some comments, we got the Anchorage Building Safety Service Area and then Eagle River's not in it. Do you build to different codes then? I mean, do you build to the Anchorage code for ones that are in the bowl and maybe a lighter code for Eagle River schools?
We build to not only the current code, but sometimes we look at it, and if we can build it better, we'll build it better, because we want the safest schools we can have.
So which code though? It's different in the bowl than it is in Eagle River.
Anchorage.
Is there a difference? Who would know this?
Yes, but they use the Anchorage.
Mr. Dunbar?
No,
Are you gonna-
I think I understand your question, and I think the answer is that there is different standards in the Anchorage Bowl and the Eagle River, but they built Anchorage standards even.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you build the Anchorage standards. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yes.
And then one comment, I heard that your bonds are for maintenance. Drives people crazy when you say that, because they assume, you're bonding for painting and mopping the floors and things like that, and I know you don't. You spend a huge amount on the basic maintenance. Replacing a roof is pretty typical. Someone gets a home loan to replace their roof. So I think you've been more careful on your phrasing, but I would not call this, I don't see basic maintenance on this list of bonds. It's roof repairs and safety improvements and so on, and that's better phrasing.
Mr. Dyson?
Yeah, the difference in the building safety is for, Eagle River is only for private, public buildings of all the same sort of thing. And my memory is that it was only for private homes, and the commercial or public access still meets has to meet the building safety. And I may be partly wrong on that, on the last one, but well, all public owned stuff is built to those.
Ms. Hildy?
What was cool to see was that at Greening, there was one room that had these seismic upgrades, and if you walked in, it was pristine. All the ceiling tiles were in because they had some of those angled wires that holding it in place, and that room looked like nothing had happened in there, nothing had fallen. So the seismic upgrades do work, the improved building codes do work, and as we continue to improve the quality of our school buildings, we'll see those benefits for the long term.
And if I may, on that very subject, I mean, most buildings have drop-in ceilings like this, which makes it easy to get at for access to everything. And one of the things that's happened with the recent code is what we call T-bar. The joints are now fixed, because those things always before could slide back and forth to make it easier to get out. So where those were fixed, and we saw it very obviously there in Greening, other thing as part of the code is that all the light fixtures are supposed to have yeah, you can see it, there's a cable there on each end, there's the wire and the cable. So the light fixtures are not, they're tied into the structure above, not just the T-bar. And we saw one of the pictures where one end of a light fixture had come down, you know, but it's a very rational way to protect people from falling stuff and so on.
And I just wanted to say, I don't know, I couldn't see that very well, but I didn't know if our safety items that we have on the bond were on that sheet that you were looking at. So part of that thing is we are looking at upgrades to some of our elementary schools that do not have the locking doors, or we need to move the vestibles so that they can see individuals. And I think we heard loud and clear from our public that they are very interested in safety and security in our schools, and so we added several of those projects. My thought was, heaven help us if what happened in the parking lot at one of our elementary schools happened at a school that didn't have a lockdown. Yes. Mr. Roth, are you ready for go through the survey with us, or a summary?
I think I am now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for again, that opportunity. So, by way of background, prior to the board vote on the bond, we did contract with a local firm to do a survey of 1,060 respondents, people who have indicated that they will vote in the election. So you can see the results, the outcome of that survey, but in short, a very large majority of the populace, the voting populace, based on these numbers, are supportive of a critical component school bond in the amount of about $55.1 million, or what is the anticipated debt retirement this year, and a very small number, 14%, relatively to that percentage that supports oppose it. So as the questioning proceeded, for amounts that exceeded $55.1 million, there was still support for it, but that number diminished to 51%. The public does prefer smaller projects that are spread across the district by major renovations of individual schools. Although, as a counter to that, people are very much supportive of neighborhood schools. 61% would prefer that the district would rebuild the neighborhood school by relocating students. Also, 64% support replacing older schools that have exceeded their design life or not economical to repair. The public likes multiple smaller bonds. 50% support that, as opposed to a single bond. They also seem receptive to multi-year bond proposals, provided there's a commitment to suspend future bonds for a period of time. So that's a quick synopsis of that. I guess what I would offer is just analysis that, again, $55.1 million at this time, again, this is pre-earthquake, was kind of the trifecta of meeting the critical component need, and also an amount that was consistent with debt retirement. Again, that strong sentiment, people do support their schools, and that the voters are willing to replace schools when it's no longer economically viable, or viable to keep older schools in the inventory. So I'll happily pause at this time and entertain questions or comments.
Ms. Hildy?
And just as an additional note, we are working on a 6-year capital improvement plan, in which case you'd see the bond in that first year. You'd see a possible of what's coming down the pipeline. So for the multi-year bond, preparing for that, what's going to be included, so that you can start sharing those needs and how we're going to address them.
Any other comments or questions from the Assembly or board members? Okay. At this time on our agenda is scheduling the upcoming joint meetings, and we have some suggested dates. One is March 22nd. And the next one in June is June 14th, if you'll put those on your calendar. And Mr. Dunbar, if you'd let us know if those work for the assembly.
Well, I won't be the,
That's true.
chair come to those meetings, but we don't have anything scheduled for March 22nd yet. that I
Okay.
see.
So if we go ahead and schedule that, then, okay.
I think that would be fine.
Okay, great. And is June 14th too far out, or?
Yeah, I think you should talk to the next chair about
Okay.
June 14th.
All right, will do. At this time, is there any other new business that someone would like to bring up, or any comments in general? If not, oh, yes. Yes, Mr. Donnelly.
I'm still interested in getting some of our police officers into our middle schools. I really do think there's a gap of security there at this time, not having our resource officers in at least one in every middle school. And so I want to continue to raise that. The board has done a resolution, and I was just wondering if there's any progress or any consideration being towards that goal.
Mr. Crowe?
Yeah, so I met with the SROs, or so the police department anyway, about that issue. And I mean, the coverage that we have at high schools covers, as Senator Donnelly Wells knows, the area middle schools and elementary. I do think the middle schools are the next area of concern, and there's a lot of times where high schools that don't need a double day of coverage, they don't need 2 officers there. Sometimes Eagle River, sometimes South, will send the SRO to middle schools that have a need. Sometimes Clark, and sometimes Begich, and sometimes others. So there's already a flexibility in the system that accomplishes some of what you're talking about. The least used SRO and sort of where there's the least need go to the highest need middle school. So there's already some overlap on that. And I'll let whoever else responds to it. I'd be glad to follow it up some more, but I think in a sort of rough way we're doing some of it, maybe not to the extent you want, Senator Donnelly. I was slow on the last slide. That polling that you have is important, of course. We want to make a reality check to make sure that our bonds have a significant chance of passing. But it's also, I mean, our job to tell them what the needs are. And I was imagining doing that in other areas, saying, would you prefer a sewage and water bond that was 5 million or 10? Well, that's interesting, but our job is to tell you, you need an $8 million sewage bond. I mean, that's what is needed. Now, we want to be careful that we're not gold plating it or that we're only doing appropriate stuff, but it's really not so much, I mean, the public at some point says, I don't know, you tell me what is legitimately needed and I'll figure out whether it's too much. But it's appropriate to do, but it should be a check at the end, not a drive of where we put a number, any more than it drives the appropriate level of road or sewage. It's a limiter on it, it's a consideration, but it doesn't really tell us what the need is. You guys tell us that.
Any other comment? Yes, Dr. Bishop.
Thank you, Madam President. I did want the Assembly to know that we removed 3 items from today, and one of them being an assessment plan and what we do. We will be happy to do a written report or have those postponed. It was simply removed due to time constraints due to earthquake.
And I thought I would just add, because I know that we're going to be looking at the, I just still call it the bus barn movement. And I went to the University Community Council, and their concern, of course, is diesel fumes. But I did talk to Dr. Bishop, and the buses that we are purchasing now, and 44 of them already have the new diesel, which is, I believe, Tom, what is it, 93? Is that too high? Yeah.
To the board president, the newer model buses, you know, have technology very similar to what new diesel pickup trucks. They use DEF. It burns the gases as they pass through the exhaust system, so that the nitrogen particulate matter is reduced by about 90+%.
And the new buses we're purchasing will also have those, because I know there have been comments from that community council on the diesel fumes, so I'm hoping they'll see a reduction in that with the purchase of the new buses. And it is also out there on our website, that information, if anybody's looking for it. Yes, Ms. LaFrance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We get a number of issues about pedestrian safety, and especially for children walking to school. And there are a couple areas in particular in District 6 that John and I have been involved with. But one thing that has come to light is, well, two things actually, that the district has safe walking routes, has a map of safe walking routes. However, it sounds like there are some schools or PTAs that may not be aware of that information. And secondly, I believe there's a safe routes committee. And is that an ASD committee, or who typically is on it, and what's the status of it? Because I've heard it's possibly defunct or inactive.
Dr. Bishop, do you?
I'll have Tom. The question was about the Safe Routes to School Committee.
So we do participate in that. The district does have representation from our student transportation department. We are not the lead for that committee.
I believe it's actually the state that's the lead on it, the Department of Transportation from the state of Alaska. I've worked with them in other places, and they're the lead on that when they receive federal monies in order to build roads. They use, and we start seeing those bike paths pop up and things like that. So the consideration of safe routes to schools is part of that. And we do participate in that program when it's convenient.
And to your original comment, you know, we'll make sure that you know, these maps, these safe walking routes that you identified, we'll make sure those get publicly released. I mean, I think they are, but we'll make sure that those are made in an easy to access format.
Quick follow-up?
Yes.
And a quick follow-up. There's some perception among folks that the district is telling them that their children are not permitted or not allowed to walk because the intersections are too dangerous, and that they're, you know, required to either be driven or take the bus. So that's a perception definitely out there.
Dr. Bishop?
I would believe that that is true, that we have had probably administrators or someone saying, I don't think that's safe, don't walk that way. But I can guarantee that there are no statutory requirements to tell anyone how to get to school, so, or board policy. So we'll just work with our folks. I think it may be a concern of not wanting someone because they didn't think it was safe. Maybe something happened in the past, but we'll be sure that our communication is appropriate.
Mr. Donnelly?
Just on that issue of busing and the distance that kids have to walk, our newest projections are we're looking at about a $3.5 million deficit in our transportation budget for this next budget cycle, and we are exploring alternatives to try to close that gap. So there may be alternatives considered that may even impact your concerns there.
Yes, Mr. Winston.
I go in panic mode when I hear that you say, oh, that's a state thing, because when you cede control of these things to the state DOT, their goal is to move cars fast, period. They want to move them fast safely, but that is their goal. And it is not to allow people to walk across the street. I mean, you have people across the street from Service Higher being told, take the bus, which takes 40 minutes to an hour. It's obscene. And to tell our people, every time you move from your house, get in a vehicle. It's dangerous. We've done that in our society for 50 years, and we are fat and sick because of it. And we need to walk. And just a little bit of walking makes us much healthier. And what we hear from the school district is they are told to take the bus. And if it's not coming from you, please clear that up, because we are told the school district tells you to walk or take the bus when the school is across the street. And we saw this at Lake Otis, and it took a girl getting killed because she did what made sense. She walked across the street to Hanshu, and we got a school zone there. The length of Lake Otis, and the transportation people in the city and elsewhere said it simply won't work. Having 2 school zones, I mean, it's like that whole mile is a school zone, and you know what? It works. And to tell people, take the tunnel. We have a safe tunnel, that's safer, there's no question. But that is a 20-minute walk to get across the street. No one's gonna do it because they're smarter than that. So we have to make our streets safe when kids are going to school. And school zones are one way to do it. But when you ceded, and thank you, maybe you weren't involved, but when it was ceded to the state to build O'Malley or Abbott Road, rebuild it, with no school zone, no accommodation for crossing that street to Service High and to Trailside, it's ridiculous. But they want to move cars fast, and they're very clear about that.
Dr. Bishop?
And Madam President, to Mr. Weddleton, I didn't mean to say that we aren't responsible for it. I was simply answering a question that said who runs that, and the corpus of that belongs with the state. And we are a partner in that as well as the city. So, but your message is understood, but I was just simply answering your question.
I know, and I'm picking on it because it's a hot button issue with me. I'm so offended by, it's not you,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
our system.
I
It's
understand.
designed to put us in cars.
Mr. Holloman? Turn your speaker on, please.
From a parent concern several years ago, it was someone complaining they had gone to the school district because there was a route, and if you came off the street onto the sidewalk, there was a big berm. That got solved because we didn't have snow for a few years, but we seem to be back. The school wouldn't address a berm that was on the outside of the sidewalk because, and like a lot of other Anchorage folks, I forget that sometimes that's a state road, not a city road. If the berm is... We won't get into details, but if the berm is between the sidewalk and the school, ASD will address it. But of course, that's not nearly as dangerous as one where a kid may slide down into the street. So actually, a coordinating committee that looks at key routes, because I know we can't solve berms all across the city, but there are some key locations where we can improve student safety a bunch with a little bit of effort. If we map out those specific routes and say we're going to make sure the right people get to these points where kids cross a lot, and make sure they've got something fairly flat and maybe some sand and all that stuff if it continues to do what we hope it does here.
Dr. Bishop?
Thank you. And to that point, and not that this would be the primary reason, but a secondary benefit would be the fewer students we have on buses, the fewer buses we need. So it would help the environment. It would help with, our health, as well as the bottom line of the dollar if we needed less buses on our road. So all around, working through a committee is, with the same message, would be beneficial.
Any other comments or questions from the Assembly or Board? Okay, if there's nothing else, I'm going to adjourn the joint school board meeting.